The next team speaking is the home team from St. Xavier's College. And speaking in favor of the motion is Aditya Vikram Doshi. Aditya is a student of economics at St. Xavier's College. His interests are theatre and debates. He is an avid reader of English prose. And guess who is his most favorite English author? The gentleman who's going to be at this very venue less than 24 hours from now, Jeffrey Archer. The only problem is that Aditya, in this world of intense social interaction and communication that we live in, will be in Mumbai at that time. Speaking in favor of the motion, Aditya Vikram Doshi.
Okay, a very good evening to this August House here. What the proposition and the opposition have essentially completely negated and neglected in today's motion is a word which I find very fascinating, because I'm quite a weak student, is the word failure, right? And why they've assumed failure to be something absolute. Let's explain the word failure. When I tell you that I fail my math paper, it doesn't mean that I've got 0 on 100. It can mean that I've got 10 on 100, it can mean I got 20 on 100. As long as I don't fulfill a certain passing criteria, you would tell me that I have failed my math paper. That doesn't necessarily mean that I haven't got any single thing right. So our burden isn't to tell you that social networking doesn't help communication in any way whatsoever. What our burden is to simply show you that given the potential that social networking has in the future, given the potential that communication as a concept has, in that particular frame, what social networking has to offer today is a failure. We're not here to tell you that social networking doesn't give any benefit whatsoever. We're here to tell you that the negatives that it gives significantly outweigh the benefits, and we also tell you that the benefits aren't really absolute and can be improved further, right? Now, a second thing in today's debate which has been completely negated, rebuttal. Let's refute some of the benefits that they've spoken about, right? They spoke about things like the Arab uprising, like the Jasmine Revolution that has happened because of social networking websites. Now, I'll tell you that's precisely the problem, right? The moment you shift your revolution from ground-based realities to a social networking medium, I agree, it makes it easier for people to interact, it makes it easier for you to share your views, it makes it easier for you to come together and oppose the government. But what you don't acknowledge is that it also makes it equally easier for the government to monitor your activities. It makes it equally easier for the government to curb your revolution by completely shutting down the internet, which is something that China does, which is something that Korea does, right? Which is something that the opposition has completely ignored. The moment we allow our freedom of speech to be massively contingent on liberties the government gives us, when we want to use that freedom of speech against the government has the ability of completely curtailing it by removing the internet in this particular case, which is a major, major flaw and a major failure of communication which the opposition hasn't really addressed. Secondly, they tell you that social networking is really good because it essentially helps in quick and easy spread of information, right? But there's a flip side to this coin. If it allows for the quick and easy spread of information, it can also allow for the quick and easy spread of misinformation, of ignominy, of blasphemy, and things like that. It's very easy for me to tell people that I love them on Facebook and keep in touch with everyone, but it's equally easy for me to post nude pictures of myself and morph it with someone else's face and cause ignominy and defamation for all those people, right? And not really get caught because of all the anonymity that social networking really offers. So this is something that the other side of the house hasn't completely contested at all. Now, let's analyze the demographics of people who essentially network on social networking websites. We normally see that our parents have lesser friends on Facebook than we do, and we'd also expect that our children will have more friends on Facebook than we do, right? Is this because we are any more or less friendly than our parents? That's not true, right? Case in point, the St. Xavier's Old Boys Network. They are as friendly, as gregarious as we are, but why is it that they have lesser friends on Facebook than us? That's because the conditions and the privacy that they tend to symbolize, that they tend to appreciate, is significantly different from the one we tend to do that. Why? Because they learn to communicate in the absence of social networking websites. Once they've learned how to communicate, they go onto a social networking website and apply those concepts of communication on the website, and then they network over there. But what the young generation is doing today, which is a major fallacy, is that they're learning how to communicate on a social networking website, which is where the fallacy lies in. Because as a medium of teaching you how to communicate, social networking fails for several reasons. Why? First of all, because it doesn't focus on confidence in body language. which is very, very important when it comes to communicating. When I'm typing something on Facebook, you don't really know how much it means to me till you see me do something like this when I'm talking about it, right? But if someone else believes in it lesser than I do, but types the same sentence, you would essentially think our feelings on the subject to be more or less the same. But that may not be true, which is where body language comes in, which is something that social networking doesn't really address. Secondly, I'll tell you about misinterpretation that social networking brings about. For example, if I'm to send a message with caps lock on by mistake, people will arbitrarily assume that I am angry, people will arbitrarily assume that I'm shouting, just because of the fact that I've left caps lock on. Right? That's not true, right? That's not true. It might just be an honest mistake, but they will just assume that I'm really, really pissed and they'll start apologizing. And that's a complete and blatant a failure of communication per se, right? What are the other forms of misinterpretation that Facebook brings? Like in another parallel universe where I would have a girlfriend, if someone likes her picture as a excessively possessive boyfriend, I don't really know what that like will symbolize because I'm not seeing the interaction she's having with that person over there. So that like can either mean A, you look really beautiful in this picture, or B, I am going to go home and stalk you and I want to have your babies, right? So I tell you that there is a major misinterpretation of a like because social networking per se today does not give you the ability to differentiate between different kinds of liking. Third, like sarcasm, right? When you essentially are being sarcastic on a social networking website, since body language isn't there, you have to put an emoticon with the tongue out just to show that you're being sarcastic. And that's severely jeopardizing the younger generation today, right? Because if I'm being sarcastic in person, I have to end every sentence with right? So that's absolutely ridiculous and preposterous and leads to death of sarcasm. Now, another very important thing is that social networking leads to a false sense of accomplishment. Let's analyze this for a second. For example, in Independence Day, in a great surge of patriotism, I will vent that patriotism by dedicating an entire status to the soldiers of our nation and say that I'm very, very proud of the fact that they've died for our country. And out of some misplaced sense of patriotism, my friends will like it as well. Just because they've liked it, I will feel that I've actually done something patriotic for my nation. I will actually feel that I've gone ahead and achieved something for the nation as a whole. When I haven't really done diddly squat, right? I've just simply posted the status. But just because of the fact that they like it, it gives me this false sense of accomplishment, which is absolutely wrong. Now, the final premise of this debate, right, as to why is it acknowledging the fact that social networking is a failure of communication is a good thing. Let's go back to the 2nd century BC, where the person who had a pigeon to whose leg used to tie messages was seen to be the bee's knees, because he was the master of communication at that particular point of time. Let's go back to the 15th century, when the Persians started the postal service. They were seen to be the kings that time because postal service was seen to be the highest form of communication. Then came the telephone, then came cell phones, etc. But only when you realize that these methods of communication have shortcomings, only when you realize that they are failing, do you actually progress further. So only when we realize that social networking as a means of communication is failing, will we be able to go ahead and achieve something better, which is devoid of the flaws that I've brought about today. Which is why I believe that not only is social networking a failure of communication, because A, failure isn't absolute, you can still achieve a few things but fail on the macro sense, but B, acknowledging the fact that it's a failure will essentially help us in the long run. Thank you.
Okay, shall we first allow the question from Loreto?
Why was almost your entire argument on the negatives and failure of social networking communication based on Facebook?
It's called an example.
Why was it your only example? Why was that your only
example? I had this really funny and amazing quote to use on Twitter, but I really couldn't feed it to my speech. But let's look at it this way, right? There's this quote that's going rampant online, which basically says that when people follow you on Twitter, you're exceptionally happy, right? But if the same number of people actually start following you in real life, you'll start crying and you'll run home, right? And that's precisely the point of what's happening over here today, right? Even in things like Twitter, just because I send a tweet saying India is great, Mera Bharat Mahan, I should not play Farmville, but like farm, according to you, that doesn't make me any more patriotic, and that doesn't actually achieve anything more for the nation, right? Yeah.
I didn't say that.
Thank you, Aditya.
You as in, it's a generic statement, so stop social
have...
networking. You'll understand it better.
Can we have the question from Cambridge University?
Hi. You began your speech with a critique of social media's role in the Arab Spring uprising. And you basically said, like, governments suppress it. So the Chinese government also suppresses freedom of speech, like orally, in writing, and in the press generally. Like, firstly, you should probably defend those as a failure of communication as well. But moreover, don't you think that the very fact that oppressive regimes wish to suppress social media, like, highlights its usefulness as a tool for democratic change?
Okay, that's. I agree that what China is doing in the context of it actually suppressing human liberties, civil liberties, communication, freedom of speech, etc., is deplorable. But this is exactly my point, right? When you talk about things like the Arab uprising and you talk about people rallying on the internet to essentially promote their cause, what I'm telling you is that it's not ineffective as a method of rallying, but you have to look at the flip side of that as well, right? So, say in a country like Libya, where you have two exceptionally strong groups, one that used to support Gaddafi and one that didn't support him. So the people who don't support Gaddafi have Facebook as an avenue to try and oust him over there and rally over there. But so do the people who do support Gaddafi, right? And the problem over here is that dictators like Gaddafi, or in the case of the Chinese government has the access to the basic tool which you are using. So if you are so addicted to social networking as a form of rallying, what you're essentially doing is you're playing into the hands of the government, because they are the ones who effectively control that medium of communication. Because if tomorrow the Chinese government decides to put the kill switch on the internet, you're left just hanging in the balance. So,
thank you very much, Aditya. Aditya's assertion basically centered around the fact that Facebook without physical feeling is fundamentally failing.